Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode into the Rise and Fall series, where we take a step back and look at some of our favorite characters in the DFFOO universe, and see how well they shaped the game when they first came out, and see how well they're handling the current state of the game to this day. As always, I want to give a special thank you to the Tomberry Troop and Rem's Dissidia database, where I found a good portion of today's information for today's video. And of course, a special thank you to Soul DFFOO, Kai, and Hayes, to help shed some light on this controversial character. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the rise and fall of Final Fantasy VIII's main protagonist, Squall. Okay, so where do we begin with a character like Squall? Well, starting back from when I first was introduced to Squall as a Final Fantasy character, does anyone remember the early days of PlayStation 1? Yeah, I'm going that far back, where it was more games that had like 20 demos on it, or where you would put the code on the menu screen which would unlock a secret demo. I'm not sure if that's how you were given the demo to Final Fantasy VIII, but that is actually how I was first introduced to Squall. And I didn't even know this was a Final Fantasy game. Mind you, I was like 4 or 5 at this time, and boy, I thought this was the coolest game ever. I originally thought that you were just running like down a hill or something, away from the water boss that summoned a tidal wave against you. As you know, that couldn't have been more further from the truth. Moving ahead a bit though, and I was again introduced to Squall in the world of Dissidia. And when I first played DFFOO, I noticed he was the first lost chapter, which I can safely assume that also meant he was the first character to ever be released into the game. Funny note here, when he was first released, which I wish I had a screenshot of this, because if you weren't aware, I'm gonna butcher this, Renzokuken was actually called Blade Fury or Blade Flurry. One of those two. And as you know, the community did not like this at all, so much so that the devs actually changed the name to what it is now, which is Renzokuken, though I'm not going to be butchering this anymore, so I'm just going to be saying Renzo from now on. Now when Squall first came out, I'm sure his splash damage was nice. This was the early stage of the game, so honestly it was probably really good back then. But he had this gimmick. You see, if Squall's Brave is under 250% of his initial Brave, then he will gain a plus variant of Renzo and his solid barrel abilities. This is clearly what you wanted, since the plus variants would hit harder and have more Brave hits. I wish I can say that he synergized well with our main man Saz, but he actually did not synergize with him at all. If anything, he synergized best with Selphie, where she could raise the end Brave for Squall by a lot, giving the player breathing room when it came to worrying about him having too much Brave on Squall. I'd also like to mention Squall had a World of Illusions weapon, which gave him increased max Brave and initial Brave by 10% as long as his health was over 80%. Not hard to do, to be honest. And when I was researching this, I actually came across a World of Illusions weapon for Laguna of all characters, and I curiously and confusingly was wondering why. And his weapon increases the speed and initial Brave of the party by a slight amount, as long as Laguna's HP was over 50%. I guess the team that the game wanted us to use back then was Laguna, Squall, and Selphie, considering his gimmick alone needed 2 World of Illusion weapons just to work around it. Kind of sad, I guess, when you think about it. Let's go ahead and get out of this era and move now to the EX era, where Squall got his debut on Selphie's event banner. And boy, if you were around like I was during this time, everyone was using Squall. And I do mean everyone was using him. He was the only thing you saw on your friends list, minus of course the newer players joining the game at the time, who had no idea, like me, on how to change your friend unit, so it was literally Warrior of Light with his bronze weapon and bronze armor for a good 2 months, till someone like me figured it out. Luckily, in regular global fashion though, Squall received an early rework, and this added a nice rendition to his gimmick. Now his S1 ability, Solid Barrel, granted Squall the new buff, Solitary Lion, which allowed Squall to use his plus abilities regardless of his Brave status. Not sure why this wasn't a thing till now, but you know, have to hook the player base somehow, I guess. However, I guess they must have forgot his EX ability, since now it was the weakest move in his entire kit. Don't worry though, it'll come back later, I promise. But during this era, no one could deny the fact that using Bahamut Summon, then summoning out your friend unit Squall and blasting out Renzo's to your fingers hurt was honestly unforgettable at this time. Now we arrive to the EX Plus era, where Squall was released alongside his adversary, Ultimecia, to which some would say was a mistake, since the so-called prize for this banner was undoubtedly Ultimecia. Now this is not to say Squall was not the prize or not good, he was just overshadowed by the hype that was over Ultimecia. Thankfully though, Squall's EX ability was no longer a joke, and was actually a nice shaving in HP dealing attack that now had 2 HP dumps, a much needed touch if you ask me. Oh, and I forgot to mention that his Renzo attack was now 100% splash versus a 50% split, which you know, was really good. Don't get me wrong of course, but it was more of a I can farm easily now at Squall than oh my god, he does 100%, my game is crashing kind of feeling, you know? Alright, now we get to the long-awaited burst weapon and LD era, where the shiny new toy in the block was given to our main man Squall first, which was really awesome. His LD weapon gave him a new move called Rough Divide, which granted him 1 stack of Roaring Hammer, which can be increased to a total of 3 stacks, and every stack granted Squall more attack and more Brave Overflow. His burst weapon, which to be honest looks really cool, granted Squall the burst attack Blastic Zone, which afterwards granted a burst aura that increased the party's HP damage dealt to attacks that, quote, deal HP damage to non-targets. Basically, characters such as Gabranth, for example, when doing his S2 ability, normally would deal 100% single target HP damage, then splash. But with Squall's burst, the 50% splash would increase to deal even more damage. It sounds like a lot, but it's a lot less complicated when put into practice, I promise. Even now, thinking about the start of the burst era and LD, I get a little cringy knowing that Squall was the first, and he immediately died down shortly after the next burst was introduced. But it wasn't like, hey, I'm still good, just, you know, people forgot about me. It was more of, we have better burst characters and burst effects, and simply using a 4-turn burst aura that just upped your splash damage just wasn't really worth it, in my opinion. However, we now get to the shiny beacon of hope that most characters may be less of a priority, but none truly ever forgotten by our lovely dev team. We get the new LD board extensions, where units have a high chance of coming back to the forefront of the lines, all except Sarah, and Squall was no exception to this. He now, with his Roaring Hammer ability, had a follow-up attack after every skill he did that dealt HP damage. That was something not even I could have anticipated for a character like Squall. I at first was thinking they would give him just free turns after break, maybe a free skill usage, but no, instead the devs decided to turn him into a high-powered damage-dealing machine. No longer was he a meme, and he was now a solid statement that with the right LD extensions and work by the devs, that any character can be taken out from the slums and into the light. All except Sarah. All in all guys, Squall is an amazing character. Even though he has been through a lot over the years in DFFOO, I'm glad the devs said, hey, let's make Squall a damage dealer, let's not care how gritty he is, and just turn it up to 11. And they definitely delivered in that regard. He even started the trend for characters to get follow-up attacks in JP. Sadly, Machina didn't like that too well, but you know, it's Squall. He definitely deserves to be in the spot where he is today. Hey guys, thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry that it took so long to come out with this. It's just been really hectic lately since I've been moving into my new home as of late. Also setting up my new stream room as well as setting up the internet was a really humongous task. Not to mention it's a holiday season, so work and school has just been frustrating. Besides all of that though, I just realized that I reached over 200 subscribers, which honestly, thank you guys so much for supporting me. I really do appreciate it, and I honestly couldn't be doing this without you, so thank you so much. And I was also thinking that you guys really don't know me all that well, unless you're in like the Souls Discord. So I figured for the 200 subscriber mark, why don't we just do a small little Q&A? So if you want, leave your questions that you want me to answer in the comment section below, and I'll answer all of them in my next video. But besides all that, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, I'll see you next time.